Emma sat quietly in her wheelchair, staring out the window as raindrops traced slow, uneven lines down the glass. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and her mother's lavender lotion, but neither scent could distract her from the heaviness in her chest. It had been 3 months since the accident that had changed her life forever. 3 months since she had woken up unable to walk, unable to run, unable to feel her legs at all. Her friends had slowly drifted away, unsure how to act around her, and even her teachers seemed to speak to her differently, their voices gentle yet distant, as though afraid to upset her fragile state. The world outside continued its rhythm, oblivious to the cage of immobility Emma now inhabited. Every morning felt like a repetition of the last, her wheelchair the only constant companion. She had once loved painting and running through the park, but now the once vibrant colors of life had dulled to gray. Her parents tried, how they tried to lift her spirits. They coaxed her to participate in small activities, offered encouraging words, and spoke of a future that seemed almost impossible to envision. But nothing penetrated the bubble of frustration, fear, and isolation that surrounded her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind a curtain of clouds, her mother knelt beside her, clasping Emma's hands in hers. "I know it's hard, sweetie," she said softly, her voice trembling with a mix of worry and hope. "But maybe there's something that could help. Something to make you smile again." Emma raised her eyebrows, skeptical. "Like what?" she asked, her voice thin, tired. Her mother hesitated, then smiled faintly. "A visit to the animal shelter. Maybe a dog? Some companions can understand us better than anyone else." Emma turned her gaze back to the window, the patter of rain echoing the dull ache in her chest. She wasn't sure she wanted another companion. She wasn't sure she wanted anything. The idea of interacting with a dog, of bending herself to care for something else when she felt so broken, seemed exhausting. But something in her mother's eyes, a mix of pleading and hope, made her consider it. Maybe it was worth a try. The next morning, she agreed, her wheelchair wheeling slowly down the familiar hallways toward a van that would take her and her mother to the local animal shelter. The drive was quiet, filled with the occasional hum of the engine and the occasional word from her mother, who tried to lighten the mood with stories from her own childhood. But Emma's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about what it would be like to be surrounded by barking, yipping, and whining dogs, so many animals in one place, each with their own personalities, their own fears, and their own stories. When the shelter came into view, Emma felt a mixture of trepidation and curiosity. The building was old but well kept, a large sign above the entrance proudly displaying the name Hope Paws Animal Shelter. Through the large glass doors, she could see volunteers moving about, carrying food, leashes, and cleaning supplies. The air smelled sharply of animals, a mixture of wet fur, shampoo, and the faint tang of disinfectant. It was overwhelming yet strangely comforting, a sensory chaos that seemed to mirror her own tangled emotions. Emma's mother helped her inside, and the bustle of activity almost knocked her back. Dogs of all sizes barked and whined from their kennels, some jumping with excitement, others lying quietly, seemingly lost in their own world. Emma's eyes roamed over the space, noting the differences in temperament, size, and age. She saw playful puppies bouncing on their paws, older dogs lounging lazily, some wagging their tails shyly at the passing humans. Yet none of them stirred the spark of curiosity inside her. Hours passed as Emma and her mother moved through the rows of kennels. Volunteers offered explanations about the dogs, their histories, and personalities. "This one's very friendly, loves children," a young woman said, pointing toward a golden retriever. "That one's shy but gentle," another added. Emma nodded politely, but didn't feel drawn to any of them. Each dog seemed either too excitable, too timid, or too ordinary. Her heart remained untouched her skepticism growing by the minute. Then, from a far corner of the shelter, a low, guttural growl reached her ears. It was not the cheerful bark of a puppy, nor the quiet whine of a timid dog. It was raw, almost menacing. Emma froze. Her curiosity piqued despite herself. She turned her wheelchair toward the sound, and there, in the shadows of a kennel, she saw him. Rogue, the German shepherd, was a striking sight. His fur was sleek, dark, with streaks of sable, and his eyes glinted with a fierce intelligence. The growl deepened as he noticed Emma, his stance defensive and alert. Volunteers whispered among themselves, warning Emma to stay back. "He's the most aggressive dog in the shelter," one said. "No one has managed to approach him safely." Yet Emma felt something strange and almost magnetic pull. While the other dogs had either excited or saddened her, Rogue intrigued her. There was something in the way he held himself, a mixture of fear, aggression, and something else she couldn't name. Despite the warnings, she inched closer, her wheelchair moving carefully over the polished floor. Her hand extended slightly, trembling yet determined. "Hi." "It's okay," she whispered softly, her voice barely above a breath. Rogue's ears twitched, his growl momentarily softening as his eyes locked on hers. Volunteers held their breath, uncertain, anxious. No one had ever approached Rogue this closely, without fear or restraint. Emma's heart pounded, her pulse quickening. She wasn't sure if this was bravery or recklessness, but she couldn't stop herself. Something inside her, broken and fragile, recognized a kindred spirit in this fierce, wild dog. For the first time in months, Emma felt alive. The sterile walls of her hospital room, the endless hours of frustration, the isolation, they all seemed to fade, replaced by this tense, electric moment. She and Rogue stared at each other, two broken souls seeking connection. She didn't know what would happen next, whether Rogue would lunge or back away, whether she would succeed or fail. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. And in that brief, silent exchange, as her hand hovered just inches from Rogue's snout, the impossible seemed within reach. Two lives, scarred by fear and pain, were about to intersect in a way that would transform them both. Emma didn't yet know it, but this encounter would mark the beginning of a journey neither she nor Rogue would ever forget. Emma's hand hovered uncertainly in front of Rogue's face, her heart pounding so hard she feared he might hear it. The German shepherd's growl rumbled low in his throat, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. Volunteers whispered nervously behind the kennel bars, exchanging worried glances. "He's never let anyone get this close," one murmured. Another shook her head, muttering something about the dog's dangerous past. Emma, however, felt neither fear nor hesitation. There was a strange pull, an invisible thread connecting her to this creature who, like her, had endured a harsh, unforgiving world. Rogue's teeth gleamed in the dim light of the kennel. He snarled, raised his hackles, and suddenly lunged forward. The volunteers gasped, ready to intervene, but before they could step in, he froze, his powerful body tensing midair. His gaze stayed locked on Emma, unblinking, almost as if he were assessing her. Something in his eyes softened, just slightly, but enough for Emma to notice. She remained still, her fingers trembling, and whispered again, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." For an uncertain moment, time seemed to stretch. The barking and yelping from other kennels faded into the background. Emma felt Rogue's intense gaze, feeling simultaneously terrified and strangely understood. She didn't move closer. She didn't retreat. She just remained there, silent except for the soft encouragements slipping past her lips. "I see you. You don't have to be afraid of me." Slowly, Rogue's growl deepened into a low whine. His rigid stance softened, though only slightly, and his tail gave the tiniest flick. Emma's pulse leapt. Could it be? Was this aggressive, unpredictable dog, the one no one had dared touch, actually responding to her? Volunteers watched in stunned silence. No one had ever witnessed such restraint from Rogue. They exchanged glances, torn between amazement and apprehension. Encouraged, Emma inched her wheelchair closer, every movement deliberate, her hand moving forward in a tentative arc. Rogue's ears twitched. He leaned back slightly, but his eyes never left hers. She murmured softly, "It's okay. I know you're scared. I understand." The words seemed to resonate, something primal echoing in Rogue's mind. He sniffed the air between them, nostrils flaring. Slowly, as though testing the waters, he lowered his head toward her outstretched hand. The volunteers held their breath. One false move and Rogue could have lunged, but he didn't. Emma felt the warmth of his fur brush against her fingers. It was rough and strong, yet surprisingly soft in places. Rogue exhaled a long, low breath, his growl fading into a hesitant whine. Emma's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. For the first time in months, she felt hope fluttering in her chest. She spoke again, softly. "I'm not going anywhere. I won't hurt you." For the next few minutes, Emma and Rogue remained locked in a delicate balance of trust and curiosity. She let her hand rest on his head, feeling the subtle tremor in his muscles beneath her fingers. He didn't pull away, but he didn't relax fully either. It was enough. Enough to show that even the most broken, aggressive beings could respond to patience and kindness. A volunteer finally stepped forward cautiously, offering Rogue a treat. The dog snatched it eagerly, but immediately returned his attention to Emma. The shelter staff exchanged whispers of disbelief. No one had ever seen this dog so calm around anyone, let alone a fragile girl in a wheelchair. Emma's parents watched from the side, hearts racing, amazed at the connection forming before their eyes. They had hoped a dog might spark a little joy in their daughter's life, but this was beyond their wildest hopes. Rogue's initial hostility seemed to melt incrementally with every visit. Over the following days, Emma returned to the shelter, gradually learning to read his signals. She noticed subtle changes, the softening of his eyes, the slight wag of his tail when she approached, the way he leaned toward her instead of away. Volunteers and staff, once wary, now encouraged her interactions, keeping a careful eye but recognizing the miracle unfolding. Emma was gaining confidence as Rogue learned patience. The bond was delicate, built not on words but on observation, gentle gestures, and quiet respect. Emma realized that Rogue's aggression was not cruelty, it was fear, a history of being misunderstood and rejected. She understood him in ways others couldn't, and he understood her, recognizing her vulnerability and her sincerity. Each moment together, each small gesture, strengthened their connection. They were two broken souls, slowly learning to trust again. Emma's wheelchair became her anchor, and Rogue's presence became her solace. She began talking to him about herself, about the accident, about her fears, and about the moments she felt isolated in her own life. Rogue listened, tilting his head, his eyes softening as though absorbing her words. Sometimes he whimpered gently, nuzzling her hand. At other times, he merely stayed close, offering silent companionship. Emma realized that this dog, feared and rejected by everyone else, had become her first true friend since the accident. Shelter staff began to take notice in ways they hadn't expected. Volunteers who had previously avoided Rogue were now witnessing a transformation. They marveled at how a paralyzed girl could approach the shelter's most aggressive dog and, with patience and courage, begin to break down his defenses. Emma became a source of inspiration, not just for Rogue, but for everyone watching. Her presence was reshaping the environment, teaching lessons about empathy, trust, and the profound impact of connection. Even Emma herself was changed. For the first time since the accident, she felt a sense of purpose, a spark of confidence. She was no longer just a passive observer of her own life. She was an active participant, guiding Rogue, learning from him, and slowly reclaiming pieces of herself she had thought lost. The bond they shared was silent yet powerful, a testament to the healing potential found in unlikely relationships. By the end of the first week, Emma and Rogue had established an unspoken routine. She would approach him slowly, speak softly, and extend her hand. He would sniff, whine, and sometimes nuzzle her fingers. Volunteers had come to expect this ritual, watching with anticipation, knowing that even the smallest sign of progress was monumental. Emma felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a connection that was deeper than words could convey. She wasn't just encountering a dog, she was witnessing a miracle of patience, courage, and understanding. That day, as Emma wheeled herself toward the exit of the shelter, Rogue followed closely, his dark eyes never leaving her. The staff waved, whispers of admiration echoing behind them. Emma glanced back at him, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. She didn't yet know how far this journey would go, how deep their bond would become, or how profoundly it would change both their lives. But in that moment, she felt alive again, truly alive, and something within her whispered that this was only the beginning. And somewhere deep in Rogue's mind, he too felt it, the pull of an inexplicable bond. The first flicker of trust toward a human who saw him not as a dangerous dog, but as a companion, a friend, and maybe, just maybe, a family. The next morning, Emma awoke to the sound of rain tapping against her window, the steady rhythm oddly comforting. Today was another day at the shelter, another opportunity to connect with Rogue. Her heart raced as she wheeled herself into the living room, her parents watching silently, a mix of concern and hope in their eyes. Emma had thought she was ready for anything, but as she prepared, she felt a nervous flutter in her chest. Today was not just another visit, it was the day she would attempt the first true interaction with the dog everyone else feared. Her mother helped her into the van, wrapping a scarf around her neck as the autumn chill seeped through the doors. The drive was quiet, save for the occasional murmur of encouragement. Emma's mind replayed yesterday's tentative encounter over and over, Rogue's softening gaze, the slight flick of his tail, the whine that had been almost imperceptible. That small display of trust had ignited a spark she hadn't felt in months, and today she was determined to fan that spark into something more. Upon arriving at the shelter, Emma was immediately greeted by the familiar chaos. Dogs barking, volunteers moving quickly, the smell of wet fur and disinfectant mingling in the air. Rogue's kennel was at the far end, and as Emma wheeled closer, she could see him lying in his corner, ears perked, eyes following her. He growled softly, low in his throat, a warning to anyone else who approached. But Emma knew better. She had learned to read his subtle signals, the tension in his stance, the flicker of curiosity behind his fierce gaze. The volunteers watched with quiet anticipation. Many had doubted that this fragile girl could achieve anything with Rogue. They had witnessed his unpredictability, his aggression, and his general refusal to trust humans. Yet there she was, moving closer without hesitation, her hand extended and her voice soft but steady. "Good morning, Rogue," she said gently. "It's me. It's okay." Rogue's growl faded slightly as he lifted his head to look at her. His body was taut, every muscle coiled like a spring, but there was no immediate lunge. Emma's breath caught. Could he sense that she wasn't afraid? Could he somehow know that her intentions were pure? Slowly, she rolled her wheelchair closer, inching along the polished floor, her hand hovering just above his muzzle. Rogue's eyes followed every movement, ears twitching in cautious attention. Finally, Emma dared to rest her fingers on the top of his head. The fur was rough and warm under her touch. Rogue flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. Emma whispered softly, "I know you're scared. I won't hurt you." She waited, holding her hand still, allowing him to process her presence. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the low hum of the other dogs and the faint footsteps of volunteers. And then, slowly, Rogue lowered his head toward her palm. The room seemed to hold its breath. Volunteers exchanged astonished glances, barely daring to move. Rogue sniffed Emma's fingers, his amber eyes never leaving hers. She spoke softly, recounting small details of her day, little stories about her favorite books and the songs she loved. Rogue listened, tilting his head and letting out a low, almost imperceptible whine, as if acknowledging her words. This was no longer a mere introduction. It was the beginning of a dialogue, an exchange of trust and understanding that transcended words. Encouraged, Emma began to extend her hand to stroke his back. Rogue stiffened slightly at first, but gradually relaxed under her careful touch. His fur bristled less, his growls diminished to soft murmurs. Emma smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face for the first time in months. She had done it. She had reached him. The bond she had sensed yesterday was real, tangible, and growing stronger with every second. The volunteers began to quietly take notes, watching the interaction in awe. They had seen many dogs at the shelter, but few had displayed such a radical transformation or such responsiveness to a human presence. Emma's parents stood to the side, hearts pounding, tears welling in their eyes. They had hoped that a dog might bring some light into their daughter's life, but what they were witnessing was beyond their wildest hopes. Emma and Rogue were forming a connection that defied logic, a miracle born from patience, courage, and empathy. As the days progressed, Emma made the interaction part of her daily routine. She would visit Rogue, speak softly, and gradually introduce small games. She brought a soft toy to the kennel, rolling it gently toward him. Rogue hesitated, eyes wide, but then nudged it back with his nose. A small victory, but monumental for a dog who had previously reacted aggressively to even the gentlest touch. Each interaction built trust, each small success reinforcing the bond between girl and dog. One day, Emma decided to read aloud to him. She wheeled herself to the kennel, holding a worn paperback in her lap. Rogue watched her intently as she began, his ears twitching, head tilting occasionally. Emma read stories of adventure, of courage, of friendship, the kind of tales she longed to experience herself. Rogue remained still, his body relaxed for the first time in her presence. She felt his warmth beside her, felt the subtle rise and fall of his breathing as he listened. It was a silent conversation, two beings sharing solace without needing words. The breakthrough was gradual but undeniable. Rogue began to follow her movements with his eyes, leaned slightly into her hand when she stroked his fur, and even allow other volunteers to witness the interaction without aggression, as long as Emma remained present. The shelter buzzed with quiet excitement at the daily miracle unfolding before them. Emma, once withdrawn and hesitant, had become the anchor in Rogue's chaotic world. And in turn, Rogue, once the most feared dog in the shelter, had become her companion, her confidant, and her first true friend since the accident. Emma felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known for months. She had discovered patience within herself, a gentle strength that could calm even the most fierce and frightened. And Rogue had discovered trust, a willingness to allow himself to be vulnerable in the presence of someone who truly understood him. Together, they were teaching each other lessons that no words could convey: courage, empathy, resilience, and the power of connection. By the end of the week, their bond was apparent to everyone at the shelter. Volunteers spoke in hushed tones about the miraculous transformation they had witnessed. Rogue, aggressive and feared, had softened under the care of a fragile, paralyzed girl. Emma, withdrawn and uncertain, had found joy, confidence, and companionship. It was a rare and precious thing, a moment that would define both their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. And as Emma wheeled herself out of the shelter that afternoon, Rogue following closely behind, both felt a quiet certainty. This was just the beginning. Their journey had only just begun, but the foundation was solid, built on trust, patience, and an unspoken understanding that neither would ever forget. Emma smiled softly to herself, a flicker of hope igniting deep within her chest. Rogue glanced at her, amber eyes shining, and nudged her hand gently. They were two souls, scarred by life's cruelties, finding solace and strength in each other, a bond that promised to change them forever. Emma returned to the shelter the following morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The day was crisp, the air tinged with autumn leaves and the faint smell of wet earth. She wheeled herself through the familiar doors, the bustling sounds of barking dogs and volunteers greeting her like a chaotic symphony she had grown used to. Rogue was already watching from the far corner of the kennel area, his amber eyes following her every movement. As soon as he saw her, his posture shifted, slightly less defensive, more attentive. Emma's heart swelled with cautious hope. She approached him slowly, her hands hovering just inches above his thick, dark fur. "Hi, Rogue," she whispered, her voice soft but confident. "It's me. I'm here." He tilted his head, ears twitching, and his growl was barely audible, a far cry from the fierce snarl that had once warned everyone to stay away. Volunteers watched in amazement, unsure if what they were witnessing was real or a trick of hope. One of them muttered under her breath, "I've never seen him like this." Emma spent the first few minutes of her visit speaking to him quietly, recounting stories from her week, the small triumphs at school, and the mundane details of her life. Rogue responded by leaning into her touch whenever she brushed his head or stroked his back. His tail, which had never dared to wag near strangers, flicked slightly, an imperceptible but hopeful sign. Emma felt a thrill of accomplishment, realizing that even the smallest gestures could yield extraordinary results. Over the next hour, Emma introduced a small toy, a plush, squeaky ball, to the interaction. She rolled it gently across the floor toward Rogue, who hesitated, eyes wide with caution. For a moment, it seemed he might lash out, but Emma remained steady, whispering encouragement. Slowly, he nudged the toy with his nose, then backed away to watch it roll. Emma laughed softly, a sound of pure joy that seemed to ripple through the shelter. Rogue barked once, short and sharp, and then nudged the toy back toward her. It was the first game they had shared, a silent acknowledgement of trust and companionship. Volunteers began to relax, some even taking tentative steps closer to observe without interfering. They had expected aggression, chaos, and unpredictability, but Emma's patience had transformed the room. Every day she spent hours with Rogue, learning his signals, discovering what made him comfortable or anxious. The shelter staff realized that this bond was no ordinary interaction. It was a lesson in empathy and understanding. Rogue responded to Emma in ways he never had to anyone else, and she, in turn, had found a purpose that transcended her own pain. One afternoon, Emma decided to introduce Rogue to a small group of children visiting the shelter for a school field trip. The children gasped as they saw him, some instinctively stepping back, but Emma's confidence shone. She wheeled up to Rogue, speaking softly and maintaining eye contact. Rogue hesitated, but did not growl. Emma extended a hand, and then guided his head gently toward the children, encouraging them to observe without touching immediately. The scene was tense, but transformative. The children watched in awe as the once aggressive dog stayed calm, responding only to Emma's cues. The breakthrough was not just for Rogue, it was for Emma herself. Each interaction with him built her confidence, teaching her resilience and patience. She began to smile more, laugh more, and speak more openly. Her parents noticed the changes immediately. She no longer avoided conversations or retreated into herself when friends or teachers approached. Rogue had become a bridge, not just to the dog's trust, but to the world outside her own limitations. Staff and volunteers began experimenting with small training exercises, always under Emma's supervision. They noticed that Rogue's aggression toward others was tempered whenever Emma was present. She had become the anchor in his stormy world. She introduced simple commands, sit, stay, and gentle, and Rogue responded, not perfectly, but consistently enough to show progress. Volunteers cheered silently behind the kennel bars, witnessing a miracle unfold before their eyes. The bond between Emma and Rogue grew beyond simple trust. It became a language of gestures, looks, and subtle cues. She learned that a tilt of his head or a flick of his ear could indicate fear, excitement, or curiosity. Rogue learned that Emma's touch meant safety, that her voice meant patience, and her presence meant stability. Together, they communicated without words, two broken souls forming a partnership that transcended fear and pain. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the shelter, Emma wheeled herself to Rogue's kennel, carrying a small blanket she had brought from home. She spread it gently on the floor beside him, encouraging him to lie down. Rogue hesitated, sniffing the fabric, before finally resting his head on it. Emma smiled, stroking his fur and whispering stories about her family, her friends, and her dreams. Rogue's eyes softened, his body relaxed, and for the first time, it felt like they were both home. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Volunteers and staff began speaking quietly about the impact Emma had on Rogue and on the shelter itself. Dogs that had once been fearful seemed calmer when she was around. Volunteers reported that her presence had a soothing effect, even on animals they thought were irredeemable. Emma's courage, empathy, and determination were teaching everyone around her lessons about trust, patience, and the power of gentle guidance. Emma's parents, once anxious about their daughter's fragile state, now watched with pride and relief. Rogue had become more than a companion. He was a mirror reflecting Emma's own resilience and courage. Together, they were healing not just each other, but the environment around them. Emma realized that even though she could not walk, she could still lead, guide, and make a profound difference in the world through patience and love. By the end of that week, Emma and Rogue had developed a routine. She arrived, wheeled herself to his kennel, spoke softly, played gently, and then read aloud from her favorite books. Rogue responded with calm attentiveness, his previous aggression a distant memory in her presence. Volunteers began documenting the progress, noting that the dog who had once terrorized the shelter was now capable of gentle play, guided entirely by the courage of one determined girl. The bond they shared became the center of the shelter's attention, inspiring other visitors, volunteers, and even staff. Emma had broken barriers, not just Rogue's, but her own, and the shelter's perception of what was possible. She had proven that patience, empathy, and unwavering kindness could transform even the most difficult situations. As she wheeled toward the exit one late afternoon, Rogue following closely, Emma felt a surge of quiet pride. They had begun a journey that would redefine both their lives. She no longer felt like a passive observer, trapped by her circumstances. With Rogue by her side, she had discovered courage, purpose, and the first glimmer of hope in months. And in the silent understanding that passed between them, it was clear. Emma and Rogue were not just a girl and a dog. They were partners, equals in a world that had once seemed cruel and unyielding. Together, they had begun breaking barriers, forming a bond that neither fear, pain, nor circumstance could sever. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was undeniable: they would face it together. Emma's routine with Rogue had become the heartbeat of her days. Each morning, she wheeled herself to the shelter with a quiet sense of purpose, determined to continue their slow journey of trust. But while their bond had strengthened, Rogue's aggression was far from gone. Staff had warned Emma that the dog's unpredictability was still very real. He could bite, lunge, or snap at strangers without warning. The once feared German Shepherd had moments of calm, especially with Emma, but outside of her presence, his temper remained volatile. Today was particularly challenging. Volunteers had arranged a supervised training session, and Rogue's kennel was temporarily open to allow more space for movement. As Emma approached, Rogue growled low in his throat, hackles raised. His ears pinned slightly back, and his lips curled in a warning snarl. Emma paused, her hands hovering gently near him. She had learned to read these signals, the subtle tension in his muscles, the narrowing of his eyes, the slight shift in weight. Each indicator told her what he was feeling, and each presented a challenge. "Rogue," she whispered, soft but firm, "we can do this together." Her words were steady, but inside, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves. She knew that one wrong move could provoke him, yet she also knew that patience was the key. Volunteers stood at a cautious distance, holding treats and leashes, ready to intervene if necessary. Emma wheeled closer, careful to meet his gaze without showing fear. The first attempt at a command was simple. "Sit." Rogue froze, tail stiff, ears twitching. Emma repeated the word softly, her hand reaching out as if to guide him. The German Shepherd's growl deepened slightly, a clear warning, but he did not snap. Slowly, his massive body lowered into a hesitant, uneven sit. Emma exhaled, relief flooding her chest. One small success, but monumental progress for a dog who had rarely obeyed any command in the past. Encouraged, Emma introduced a new exercise, stay. She carefully wheeled backward a few feet, her gaze never leaving him. Rogue's eyes followed, muscles taut. For a tense few moments, it seemed he might break the command, lunge forward or flee. But then, almost imperceptibly, his body relaxed slightly. He stayed in place, ears flicking, tail giving a tiny wag. Emma smiled, whispering gentle praise. Volunteers gasped softly, some exchanging amazed glances. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. Despite these successes, challenges arose quickly. Rogue had unpredictable flare-ups. A volunteer accidentally dropped a bag of treats, causing a sudden noise that triggered him. He barked, snapped, and lunged toward the source, only narrowly avoiding contact with the startled volunteers. Emma's heart pounded as she wheeled closer, speaking softly, holding her hands steady. "It's okay, Rogue," she murmured, her voice calm and rhythmic. Gradually, his barking slowed, his body relaxed, and he returned to her side. It was a reminder that progress was not linear, that trust required constant attention and patience. Over the next few weeks, Emma's training sessions became increasingly structured. Volunteers introduced small obstacles, mild distractions, and controlled socialization exercises, always under Emma's guidance. Rogue's reactions were varied, sometimes calm and obedient, other times tense and unpredictable. Emma learned to adjust her approach in real time, observing his signals and responding with precision. She discovered that her calm demeanor, quiet voice, and careful gestures were more effective than any command or treat. Rogue's aggression softened, only when he trusted the environment and, more importantly, Emma herself. One afternoon, a near incident occurred that tested their bond. A new volunteer, unaware of Rogue's triggers, moved too close while trying to adjust his collar. Rogue snapped, teeth flashing, and lunged toward the person. Emma's heart leapt as she wheeled forward, placing herself between them. She spoke softly, holding her hands steady, her voice unwavering. "It's okay, Rogue. Stop. Listen to me." Slowly, hesitantly, Rogue's body relaxed, his teeth retreating. The volunteer froze, eyes wide with awe and relief. Emma exhaled deeply, her hand resting gently on his back. That day became a pivotal moment in their journey. Emma realized that trust went both ways. Rogue had to trust her guidance, but she also had to trust her instincts, remain calm under pressure, and act decisively when necessary. Each challenge strengthened their bond, teaching them resilience, patience, and empathy. Emma began to understand that true connection was not just about obedience, but mutual respect and understanding. Rogue's transformation was gradual, marked by small victories and setbacks. He learned to accept other volunteers' presence when Emma was nearby, to follow commands with minimal resistance, and to respond to soft vocal cues rather than harsh corrections. Emma's parents watched with pride as she navigated each session with grace, her confidence growing alongside Rogue's obedience. Her initial hesitation had evolved into skillful, intuitive leadership, proof of how adversity could forge strength. Beyond the physical exercises, Emma discovered the emotional impact of their sessions. Rogue began showing subtle signs of affection, nudging her hand, resting his head on her lap, and occasionally leaning against her wheelchair. These gestures, small as they were, carried enormous weight. They symbolized trust, vulnerability, and the silent promise of companionship. Emma responded with laughter, gentle words, and continued presence, reinforcing the bond they had worked so hard to build. Volunteers often commented on the transformation, not just in Rogue, but in Emma herself. They noticed her growing confidence, her ability to handle stress calmly, and her unwavering patience. Emma had become a model of perseverance, showing that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The lessons she learned extended beyond the shelter, shaping her interactions with friends, family, and the world outside. Some days were harder than others. Rogue's aggression sometimes flared unpredictably, leaving Emma frustrated or anxious. But each challenge was met with determination. She refused to give up, believing that trust and love could overcome fear. Volunteers noticed the mutual growth. The dog who had once been feared and the girl who had once withdrawn into herself were now thriving together. It was a partnership built on respect, patience, and a profound understanding of each other's needs. By the end of the month, significant progress had been made. Rogue followed commands reliably, tolerated the presence of strangers under Emma's supervision, and displayed a gentler demeanor. Emma had become a skilled trainer in her own right, her calm authority guiding the once aggressive dog. Together, they had faced challenges, setbacks, and fears, and emerged stronger, their connection deepening with every shared experience. The shelter had transformed alongside them. Staff and volunteers found renewed inspiration in Emma's dedication, motivated to approach other dogs with patience and empathy. Rogue's story became a testament to the power of trust and the human-animal bond. And for Emma, each day brought not only victories with Rogue, but victories within her self-renewed confidence, hope, and the belief that she could overcome even the most daunting challenges. By the time she wheeled out of the shelter that afternoon, Rogue following closely, Emma's heart swelled with pride. They had faced danger, tested boundaries, and navigated fear together. And though the road ahead remained long, they had proven that patience, understanding, and unwavering kindness could transform even the most difficult situations. Rogue, once the shelter's most aggressive dog, and Emma, once a girl confined by fear and circumstance, had forged a bond that could withstand anything. In that moment, Emma whispered softly, resting her hand on his head, "We're in this together, Rogue, no matter what." The dog leaned into her touch, amber eyes reflecting trust and acceptance. They had faced their challenges head-on and emerged stronger, their bond unshakable, and their journey far from over, but already miraculous. Weeks of patience, perseverance, and careful guidance had led to this day, the day Emma sensed that Rogue's walls were beginning to crumble completely. The shelter was quieter than usual, with fewer visitors and the distant hum of volunteers attending to routine tasks. The sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Emma wheeled herself toward Rogue's kennel, her heart fluttering with anticipation. This wasn't just another training session. It felt different, electric, as if both she and Rogue knew that something monumental was about to occur. Rogue was already alert, sitting in his usual corner, amber eyes fixed on Emma as she approached. His body was tense, but there was no growl, no defensive posture, just a quiet, watchful vigilance. Emma paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch, absorbing the weight of the space between them. She knew that forcing anything now could shatter weeks of progress. She took a slow, deep breath, letting her calmness radiate outward. "Rogue," she whispered softly, her voice steady and soothing. "It's just us. You can trust me. I won't hurt you." For a brief instant, time seemed suspended. Rogue's ears flicked, his eyes softening imperceptibly. He took a tentative step forward, a small gesture, yet monumental in its significance. Volunteers watched from the sidelines, holding their breath as they realized this was a turning point. Rogue had begun to make a conscious choice to accept trust, to surrender the armor he had built over years of fear and rejection. Emma wheeled closer, her fingers extended gently. Rogue lowered his massive head toward her hand, inhaling cautiously. This time, there was no hesitation, no flinch, only the warmth of his fur against her skin. Her lips curved into a soft, genuine smile. "That's it, Rogue. You're safe." "I've got you," she murmured. The words seemed to resonate, vibrating through the space between them. Encouraged, Emma guided her hand along Rogue's back, brushing his fur slowly, deliberately, reassuringly. He leaned into her touch, the tension in his muscles melting. For the first time, he allowed himself to relax completely in her presence, resting his head on her lap. Emma felt the weight of his trust pressing gently against her legs, a profound acknowledgement of their bond. Volunteers exchanged astonished glances, whispers of disbelief and admiration echoing softly through the shelter. Emma continued to speak softly, recounting the events of her week, sharing her thoughts, fears, and dreams. Rogue's amber eyes remained fixed on hers, head occasionally lifting to meet her gaze. He no longer flinched, no longer growled, no longer projected the aggression that had defined him. It was a moment of pure, unspoken understanding, a connection that transcended fear, words, and even species. Then, as if to seal their breakthrough, Rogue did something no one had ever seen before. He nudged Emma's hand gently with his nose, a soft, deliberate gesture of affection. Emma laughed softly, tears brimming in her eyes. "You did it, Rogue. You really did it," she whispered. She had never felt such pride or such joy. For both of them, this was more than progress, it was liberation. Over the following days, their interactions took on a new depth. Rogue allowed other volunteers to approach him while Emma was present, a remarkable sign of trust and socialization. He began responding consistently to commands, no longer just in moments of quiet observation, but amid mild distractions, noises, and movement. Emma's confidence soared alongside his obedience. She had discovered her own strength, patience, and ability to guide, teach, and nurture qualities that had been dormant since her accident. One afternoon, Emma wheeled herself to Rogue's kennel, carrying a blanket and a small plush toy. She spread the blanket on the floor beside him and placed the toy gently at his paws. Rogue sniffed the fabric and the toy, then settled comfortably, resting his head on the blanket. Emma spoke softly, describing the warmth of home, the comfort of family, and the hope she held for the future. Rogue's eyes closed briefly, and he exhaled slowly, his body relaxed in a way that once seemed impossible. Emma realized that Rogue's transformation was not just behavioral, it was emotional. The dog who had been feared, aggressive, and untouchable was now capable of vulnerability, affection, and calm trust. For her part, Emma discovered that trust was a two-way street. She had to remain patient, calm, and understanding, but she also had to believe in her own ability to lead and protect. Together, they were healing each other. The breakthrough had ripple effects throughout the shelter. Volunteers reported that Emma's presence calmed other dogs, even those known for skittish or aggressive behavior. Her ability to communicate through quiet words, gentle touch, and unwavering patience became a model for handling difficult animals. The staff marveled at the transformation, witnessing firsthand the impact a single, courageous individual could have on the lives of animals and humans alike. Emma's parents noticed the changes in her outside the shelter as well. She laughed more freely at home, spoke more openly about her thoughts and dreams, and displayed a newfound confidence in her interactions with others. Rogue had become her companion, her anchor, and her teacher in ways neither of them could have predicted. Their bond had transcended the limits imposed by her paralysis, showing her that courage and connection could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. One evening, as the shelter was closing, Emma wheeled herself to Rogue's kennel for one last visit before heading home. Rogue followed closely, resting his head gently on her lap. She whispered softly, "We did it, Rogue. We've come so far." He nudged her hand, tail wagging slightly, a silent acknowledgement of their journey together. Emma felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced fear, aggression, and doubt, and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The breakthrough was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. Rogue's aggression had been tempered, his fear replaced with cautious confidence, his trust in Emma absolute. Emma had discovered resilience, empathy, and courage within herself. Together, they had transformed not only each other, but the shelter itself. Volunteers and staff often remarked that Emma had brought a sense of hope and inspiration that no one had anticipated. In the quiet moments that followed, Emma reflected on the journey. She realized that their bond was more than companionship. It was mutual healing. Rogue had found someone who understood his pain and fear without judgment. Emma had found a friend who accepted her completely, despite her limitations. Their trust was not built overnight, nor through force or coercion. It was built through patience, understanding, and unwavering presence. As Emma wheeled herself toward the exit that day, Rogue following closely, she felt a quiet pride and joy. They had achieved something extraordinary, a bridge between fear and trust, aggression and calm, isolation and companionship. The breakthrough was not just Rogue's, it was hers too. In facing each other's vulnerabilities, they had discovered strength, courage, and the transformative power of love. And though the road ahead remained long, Emma and Rogue faced it together, confident that no obstacle, fear, limitation, or past trauma could break the bond they had forged. Their journey was far from over, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. They had each other, and that was enough. The day had finally arrived, Adoption Day, at the shelter. The air buzzed with excitement, volunteers scurrying to arrange tables, balloons, and signs. Families walked through the doors, eager to meet potential new pets. Yet amidst the cheerful chaos, Emma felt a quiet sense of nervous anticipation. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day she would see just how far she and Rogue had come, and perhaps take the next step toward making him a permanent part of her life. Emma wheeled herself to Rogue's kennel, her heart racing. Rogue sat patiently, ears perked, eyes scanning the room. The once feared dog, aggressive and unpredictable, now exuded calm attentiveness. Volunteers whispered their amazement. "Look at him," one said softly. "He's different." Indeed, Rogue's posture reflected focus and composure. Emma extended her hand toward him, and he nuzzled it gently, tail wagging slightly, a gesture of trust and affection that spoke volumes about their journey together. As families wandered past, some paused to observe Rogue. Their expressions ranged from awe to hesitation. No one could believe that this massive, powerful dog, once notorious for aggression, was so calm, gentle, and responsive. Emma, sensing both excitement and caution, guided Rogue with quiet confidence, giving subtle commands and gentle touches. Rogue followed her lead, demonstrating the depth of their bond. Each person watching could see the trust, respect, and unspoken understanding between girl and dog. The shelter staff decided to allow Emma to lead Rogue through a small demonstration. She wheeled him through a simple set of commands: sit, stay, heel, while maintaining eye contact and speaking softly. Rogue obeyed flawlessly, following every cue without hesitation or tension. Volunteers and visitors gasped and whispered in disbelief. The transformation was remarkable. This was the same dog who had snarled at anyone approaching his kennel just weeks ago. Now he moved with calm attentiveness, his confidence in Emma evident with every step. Emma's parents watched from a distance, hearts swelling with pride. They had seen their daughter's journey, the countless hours of patience, the emotional growth, and the courage she had discovered within herself. And now they saw the tangible results. Rogue, gentle, obedient, and deeply attached to Emma, moving confidently through the room under her guidance. It was more than a display of skill. It was proof that love and patience could conquer fear and aggression. Volunteers approached Emma, offering quiet congratulations. "I can't believe the difference," one whispered. "It's like a miracle." Emma smiled softly, brushing her hand along Rogue's back. "It's been a long journey," she said quietly, "but he's taught me just as much as I've taught him." Rogue leaned into her touch, tail wagging slightly, as if understanding the sentiment. The bond between them radiated through the room, inspiring awe and admiration. As the day progressed, families expressed interest in other dogs, but Rogue remained calm and attentive to Emma. His eyes rarely left her face, his body relaxed yet alert. Emma wheeled him through the room, guiding him gently past potential adopters. Though many were drawn to his impressive size and striking appearance, it was clear that his heart belonged entirely to Emma. The connection they shared was unmistakable, a silent promise that nothing would come between them. Then came the pivotal moment. The shelter director approached Emma with a warm smile. "Emma," she said softly, "you and Rogue have shown us something extraordinary. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to adopt him officially, if you're ready." Emma's eyes widened, heart hammering in her chest. This was the culmination of months of effort, patience, and unwavering trust. The thought of officially calling Rogue hers brought tears to her eyes. She nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I want him to come home with me. He's family now." Volunteers and staff smiled, some fighting back tears. Rogue, sensing the excitement, nudged her hand with his nose, tail wagging slightly. Emma's parents embraced her, proud beyond words. They had witnessed not just a rescue story, but a transformation, both for their daughter and for a dog once deemed unmanageable. The adoption process was completed with care and celebration. Volunteers snapped photos, documenting the milestone. Emma and Rogue posed together, their bond evident in every glance, every gesture. Rogue rested his head gently on Emma's lap as the paperwork was finalized, a quiet affirmation that he trusted her completely. For the first time in months, Emma felt a profound sense of home, belonging, and companionship. Leaving the shelter, Emma wheeled herself toward the van, Rogue trotting calmly beside her, leash held gently in her hands. Volunteers waved, calling out congratulations and words of encouragement. Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment settle in her chest. Rogue's presence beside her was comforting, affirming, and empowering. She knew that this was only the beginning of a life together, filled with challenges, triumphs, and countless moments of joy. The ride home was quiet, Rogue sitting patiently beside Emma, occasionally nudging her hand as if checking for reassurance. Emma's parents spoke softly, marveling at the transformation they had witnessed. "He's amazing," her father said. "But so are you." Emma smiled, feeling a swell of pride. She had not only earned Rogue's trust, but had also discovered her own strength, courage, and capacity for love. Arriving home, Emma wheeled through the front door, Rogue close at her side. He explored cautiously, sniffing the corners, but always returning to her side. Emma's room had been prepared for him, with a soft bed, toys, and blankets. Rogue sniffed the bed, then lay down contentedly, resting his head on the plush surface. Emma smiled, brushing her fingers along his back. "Welcome home, Rogue," she whispered. "This is where you belong." The days that followed were filled with small joys, discoveries, and routines. Rogue adjusted to his new environment, confident and calm, yet always attentive to Emma's presence. They explored the backyard together, practiced commands, and shared quiet moments of companionship. Emma's confidence flourished alongside Rogue's stability, each teaching the other lessons in patience, resilience, and unconditional love. Emma's parents marveled at the transformation. Their daughter, once reserved and cautious, now radiated confidence and joy. Rogue, once aggressive and feared, had become gentle, obedient, and deeply attached to his new family. Together, they had forged a bond that went beyond simple companionship. It was a partnership, a mutual support system, and a testament to the power of empathy and perseverance. Neighbors and friends who visited were struck by the sight. A paralyzed girl, laughing and playing with a once feared dog, a duo that radiated trust, love, and companionship. Emma shared their story with anyone who asked, inspiring others with a lesson that patience, empathy, and courage could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Rogue had become more than a pet. He was a symbol of transformation, resilience, and the extraordinary potential of human-animal bonds. As the sun set over their home that evening, Emma and Rogue sat together in quiet contentment. She rested her hand on his head, and he leaned gently against her wheelchair. There was no need for words, none were necessary. Their journey had been long, filled with challenges, setbacks, and breakthroughs. But in that moment, they were home together and whole. The world outside was secondary. They had each other, and that was enough. Emma whispered softly, "We did it, Rogue. We really did it." The dog nudged her hand in response, tail wagging slowly, a quiet affirmation of their bond. Together, they had conquered fear, built trust, and discovered the transformative power of patience and love. The journey was far from over, but for now, Emma and Rogue basked in the triumph of being together, an unbreakable team, ready to face whatever life would bring next. The morning sun streamed through the windows, painting warm golden streaks across the living room where Emma and Rogue were curled together. Months had passed since the adoption, and life had settled into a comforting rhythm. Emma's wheelchair glided effortlessly across the hardwood floors, Rogue padding silently at her side, attuned to her every movement. Their bond, once tentative and fragile, had deepened into something profound, an unspoken understanding that neither needed words to communicate. Together, they navigated the world, a team forged through patience, trust, and unconditional love. Emma's parents watched with awe as their daughter wheeled around the house, laughing and speaking with confidence. Rogue followed her everywhere, sometimes nudging her hand with his nose, sometimes resting his head on her lap while she read or listened to music. The once aggressive dog had become gentle, loving, and protective, and the transformation was remarkable. Emma had not only rescued him from his fears, but in turn, he had rescued her from months of isolation, self-doubt, and despair. Their days were filled with small, joyful routines. In the mornings, Emma would practice commands and exercises she and Raug had perfected at the shelter. Sit, stay, come, and gentle were no longer just commands. They were a dialogue, a rhythm of communication that strengthened both of them. Raug obeyed promptly, his tail wagging gently, ears perked, and eyes shining with attentiveness. Each success reinforced their bond, a daily reminder of how far they had come together. Walks in the nearby park became a treasured part of their routine. Volunteers from the shelter often accompanied them at first, marveling at the transformation. Raug walked calmly beside Emma's wheelchair, leash loose in her hand, ears flicking at the sounds of birds and children playing. No longer aggressive or fearful, he approached the world with a measured confidence, always aware of Emma's guidance and presence. Passers-by often paused, drawn to the extraordinary sight of a paralyzed girl and her once-feared dog moving as one. Emma had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. The patience and empathy required to guide Raug had spilled over into her own life. She spoke more freely with friends, engaged in conversations without hesitation, and even began attending social activities with newfound confidence. Raug's presence provided comfort and assurance, a living testament to her ability to nurture, teach, and lead despite her limitations. Their partnership was transforming not just their lives, but the way Emma interacted with the world. One particularly memorable afternoon, Emma received a call from the shelter. They were hosting a success stories event, celebrating animals who had been rehabilitated through love and care. Emma was invited to speak about her journey with Raug. Excitement mingled with nervousness as she prepared, reflecting on how much she and Raug had overcome together. She wheeled into the shelter that evening, Raug by her side, and began recounting their story to a captivated audience of volunteers, staff, and adopters. "Raug taught me patience," she said softly, her voice steady. "And he taught me courage. He trusted me when no one else could, and I trusted him in return. Together, we learned that even the most broken hearts, human or animal, can heal with love and perseverance." The room was silent, listeners captivated by the depth of their bond. Raug nudged her hand gently, tail wagging, a quiet affirmation of their shared journey. After her speech, several visitors approached, eager to meet Raug. Emma guided him with quiet confidence, allowing them to pet him under her watchful eye. Raug responded calmly, his amber eyes shining with trust and attentiveness. Many volunteers whispered in awe, noting how remarkable the transformation had been, from the shelter's most aggressive dog to a gentle, loving companion. Raug had become a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring everyone who met him. At home, life continued to thrive. Emma and Raug had developed a rhythm that balanced care, play, and companionship. Even mundane tasks became opportunities for connection. She would roll through the kitchen while Raug followed, sniffing curiously, but always returning to her side. She would read aloud while he rested beside her, or watch television with him lying at her feet. Each moment, no matter how ordinary, was filled with warmth, trust, and shared understanding. Emma's parents often reflected on the transformation. Their daughter, once withdrawn and cautious, now radiated confidence, joy, and resilience. Raug, once aggressive and feared, was gentle, protective, and affectionate. Together, they had achieved something extraordinary, a bond that healed wounds on both sides, proving that patience, empathy, and love could overcome fear and limitations. As the seasons changed, Emma and Raug faced challenges. Too unexpected noises, visitors, or sudden medical appointments, but nothing shook their partnership. They had learned to adapt together. Raug's aggression no longer dictated their lives. Emma's determination guided them both. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged stronger, more resilient, and deeply connected. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of gold and pink, Emma wheeled to the backyard with Rogue beside her. She spread a blanket on the grass, and they sat together in silence. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, and the world felt peaceful. Emma rested her hand on Rogue's head, feeling the warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. Rogue leaned gently into her, a quiet affirmation of trust and companionship. "I'm so glad you're with me, Rogue," she whispered. "We've come so far, and I know we can handle whatever comes next together." Rogue nudged her hand in response, tail wagging slowly. In that moment, Emma understood fully that their journey had been about more than rehabilitation or training. It had been about love, connection, and the courage to trust again. Their story spread throughout the community. Local newspapers ran features on Emma and Rogue, highlighting the transformative power of patience, empathy, and determination. Other families reached out, inspired by their journey, eager to learn how to help difficult animals or support children facing physical challenges. Emma and Rogue had become more than companions. They had become symbols of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary possibilities of human-animal bonds. At home, every day was a celebration of small victories, a new command mastered, a quiet walk in the park, a visit from a friend. Each moment was cherished, because Emma knew how far they had come. Rogue, who had once been aggressive and fearful, had become her loyal protector, her confidant, and her best friend. Emma, who had once felt limited and isolated, had discovered courage, patience, and the joy of unconditional love. Years later, Emma would reflect on their journey with pride and gratitude. Rogue had changed her life, and she had changed his. Together, they had shown that love could conquer fear, that patience could overcome aggression, and that trust, once earned, could transform even the most broken hearts. Their bond had endured challenges, setbacks, and fears, and it had emerged stronger, unbreakable, and everlasting. As night fell over their home, Emma and Rogue curled up together on the couch. She rested her head against his side, fingers brushing through his fur, and he rested his head on her lap. The world outside faded away. There was only the warmth, the trust, and the unwavering companionship between a girl and her dog. They had faced the impossible and triumphed not through force, but through patience, understanding, and love. Emma whispered softly, "We did it, Rogue. We really did it." Rogue nudged her hand gently, tail wagging in slow contentment. Together, they had found home, belonging, and the kind of friendship that could weather anything. And in that quiet, perfect moment, both knew they would never be alone again.